Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brianna Martin. I'm the Senior Marketing and Events Manager here at Mighty Citizen. We're here today for measuring your marketing effectiveness. How mature is your marketing? So before I introduce the speakers, just going to go over a quick couple of items. If you have any questions during the webinar, to make sure they're not missed, please post them in the Q&A area of the Zoom as opposed to the chat, because there's a lot of chatter back and forth. Sometimes we will miss those. We also have closed captioning available. There's a live transcript option at the bottom of your screen where you can enable it if needed. And then last but not least, as the cover slide says, the presentation slides, a link to the recording, and then a few other tools will be sent to each attendee tomorrow. So don't feel pressured to take notes. And today's webinar was also going to include a walkthrough of our new self-assessment to measure your marketing maturity called the Mighty GPS. I will share a link to that assessment in the chat and the resource page listed on the slides shortly. All right, so I'm excited to introduce our speakers. Today we have Rachel Clemens, Mighty Citizen's Chief Marketing Officer, and then Jarrett Way, our Content and Digital Marketing Manager. So Rachel, I think you're going to start us off, so take it away.
Hey y'all, get ready. Today we're going to talk about the Sasquatch of the marketing world, the abominable snowman, the non-snarky teenager, and the Loch Ness monster all rolled into one, otherwise known as marketing effectiveness. We're going to capture that elusive creature. And here at Mighty Citizen, we see a direct correlation between marketing effectiveness and marketing maturity. So buckle up for measuring your marketing effectiveness. How mature is your marketing? Bree gave a quick intro. I'm Rachel. I'm the CMO here at Mighty Citizen. If you're not familiar with Mighty Citizen, we're the branding, marketing, and digital agency for mission-driven organizations. We help our clients increase their revenue, build their brand awareness, and better their communities through all things communications like branding, messaging, campaigns, websites, etc. My strengths are comms. I've been doing that for over 20 years, and patience, because I have a snarky teenager in training. He is 11 and well on his way. And then my weakness, especially right at the moment, 'tis the season for Cadbury eggs. And so, Jarrett, I'm going to hand it over to you for an intro.
Thank you, Rachel, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Again, my name is Jarrett Way. I'm the Content and Digital Marketing Manager here at Mighty Citizen. Strength of mine is storytelling. I have been fortunate enough to be able to do some storytelling for some great organizations in my career so far, and I love storytelling for Mighty Citizen every day. A weakness of mine is breakfast tacos. If you are familiar with Austin, you know that breakfast tacos are like currency here, and I'm a very rich man, I will say.
I love that we both went with food weaknesses.
I know,
so many
I know.
things, but for both of us, it's definitely food.
So by the end of this presentation, we are hoping that you'll be able to do a few things. First of which is to understand the value of marketing effectiveness, how it can empower you in your organization to know what's working, what isn't for your marketing. Secondly is to measure your own marketing effectiveness. And Rachel mentioned that we have the tool, the Mighty GPS, that we're going to walk you through today to show you how you can start to measure your own marketing effectiveness. And lastly, to take steps to further your own marketing effectiveness. So like Rachel said earlier, measuring your marketing effectiveness is a beast, right? It is something very nebulous, very vague, and it's something that's hard for a lot of marketers to be able to do. It's super elusive. Effectiveness can simply just be hard to measure. Now, before we go any further, I want to do a quick poll. I'm just curious. I want to know, do you know how effective your marketing is overall? So I want to hear if it's yes. If it's no, I have an option in there if you're afraid to say, but know that this is a safe place. If you are afraid to say, give us your best yes or no, but C is there if you need it.
You wouldn't have to be here if it was easy, right?
Give me just a few seconds, few moments. All right. So it looks like quite a few people, 72%, it's kind of teetering on right now, say that they do not know how effective their marketing is overall. And if that is the case, you are in the right spot.
Let me stop sharing there, Jarrett.
Yeah, no worries. So with anything, there are two major ways to measure it. So you can measure something quantitatively or qualitatively. And we all love the quantitative data. And a lot of us spend a lot of money into technology, investing into technology to give us more of that quantitative data. But there are still challenges that come with quantitative data. There's this really great study from Deloitte, this brand marketing effectiveness study, that indicates that even with all the quantitative data that marketers can have for their own organizations, they still struggle with effectively capturing how effective the marketing is just through the numbers. So you can see here, 53% of people say that there's a lack of data availability for the metrics that they want to measure. I won't read all these to you, but you can see that some say that their data isn't trustworthy or they don't know what to measure to find out what their effectiveness is. So you certainly are in good hands if you do not know how to effectively measure your marketing. A quick note on surveys. At Mighty Citizen, we say all the time that surveys are a really great, scalable way to get some good quantitative data for your organization. But even those have their own limitations in terms of measuring marketing effectiveness. So I just want to make a clear point right now in saying that we do not recommend surveys as means to measure marketing effectiveness for your organization. So we have our quantitative data. Now let's take a look at qualitative data, which often equates to what we call our gut instinct, right? So the big question that we're trying to answer is, does your marketing work? And that is a huge question to answer. And like I said, that can feel very nebulous. It can feel very overwhelming. Unless you have a fairly sophisticated set of technology in place in your organization, this answer is often based on your opinion and the opinions of others. So even if you have all the sophisticated technology, so if you're an organization with a marketing automation platform or some business intelligence, that's still only giving you the insight for your digital marketing efforts. But a lot of your marketing still exists offline, so it has to be accounted for somehow. So your question is your marketing working? If you can't quite answer that right now, then you can drill it down just a little bit to ask the question, what is working for you? If you know what is working for your organization, do more of it. That's what you should absolutely be pouring your resources into. And if you do know what's working for you, then you can make the case because you have the numbers, you have the data to ask for more money if you need it. So just as important as knowing what is working for you, you need to know what isn't working for you. And that might even be more important than knowing what does work for you. So if you can answer this one, what isn't working for you, then you should stop doing those things. Stop pouring any resources into anything that is not working for your marketing efforts. And sometimes a thing that isn't working for you could be something that you're not doing already. So if that's the case, then maybe that's something that you need to start doing. If you're a marketer that can't answer either of these questions, what is or isn't working for you, if you're a marketer that said, no, you can't measure your marketing effectiveness, you're not sure what it takes, do not feel bad. You're among friends here. You're in the exact right place. And I'll turn it right back over to Rachel to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, measuring effectiveness or marketing effectiveness requires vulnerability. I'm just going to say it up front. It is really frightening as a marketer to look into this sometimes because you might have a really good feeling that it's working and then find out that it's not. And that's a true fear. When we asked you if you guys can measure your marketing effectiveness, most of you said no. It's not easy to admit that. And it's also not an easy thing to measure. So just know that you are among peers and most of us don't have a great handle on it. Do know though, that when you measure your effectiveness, you can choose who to share it with. Some of you will want to share it with leadership because maybe you can help make the case for funding in certain areas, or you want to show, I could really use a person here, but not all of you will. And some of you, probably most of you, will want to share it with your full team, and we'll talk more about that later. So as much as it requires vulnerability and it's difficult to do, it is worth it in the long run. And here's why understanding marketing effectiveness matters. First of all, it allows you to capitalize on what's working. Like Jarrett said, whatever's working, let's put more money into it, get more return on our investment. It'll help you uncover low-hanging fruit. Oftentimes, you'll realize you're doing something or you're not doing something that actually would be pretty easy to do and pretty easy to try out and not cost a lot of money. And so understanding where your gaps are can help you basically uncover those options. It's going to save you time and money on things that you should not be doing because they're not working. Go ahead and scrap that and try something new, or scrap that and put more effort into something that we know is working. It's going to show you how to augment your team. We always talk about what's next, but I think as marketers, and especially those of us that are leading our departments, we have to think about who's next. And the marketing effectiveness, understanding where your weaknesses are, your opportunities for growth, can be great opportunities to identify who might be needed next on your team. For example, if you figure out that your content isn't really resonating or is not really working for you, maybe the next person's a content creator or a copywriter. Marketing effectiveness helps you understand your return on investment so that you know what's working and where those dollars are benefiting the most, and helps you ask for those investments as needed. So $64 million question, Rachel, how do I measure it? We've been asking ourselves the same question for years. Again, qualitative, quantitative, there's lots of different ways, but we've also been helping our clients answer this question for years. Here they are spending money with us, and we maybe have the quantitative data, but we don't always have true picture of the whole picture, including offline efforts of their marketing. So we want to help them show progress to their leadership. So we know the work that we're doing is working, and now we want to help you measure it as well. So we set out to answer this question: how do we measure it? And we came up with the Mighty GPS, which is a self-assessment to measure your marketing maturity. It's a survey. It's going to take 10 minutes or less. Our data is currently showing it takes about 6 minutes for most people to fill it out. It's a marketing maturity model, and that's what we call it, but we're really measuring marketing effectiveness as well. The more effective your marketing is, generally the more mature it is. And I do want to note here, just straight up going into it, we're not talking necessarily about organizational maturity. You can have a mature organization. You can have a 100-year-old organization and still not be effective in terms of your marketing, and vice versa. You could have a young, scrappy organization that's really effective. So just know going in that maturity does not always equate to years of doing what you're doing. Quick note on methodology. We've been talking about this maturity model for years. Finally, you know how it is when you're trying to do your own projects, finally got it up and off the ground. And we looped in our subject matter experts across all of our disciplines. So designers, user experience team, developers, project managers. And we asked them, what are the most relevant things that show maturity within each of your disciplines? We then created a prototype of the self-assessment and did some user testing. So we did testing with about a dozen clients and friends of the agency, and all in the mission-driven space. And those logos you're seeing are the people that we tested with, got lots of great information from them, and then proceeded to take that feedback and make some edits to both the questions and the scoring. Beta launched in November with another small group, did another few changes, and then we publicly launched in February. And because this is new, just like every other marketing effort, it is not set it and forget it, it will evolve. So we welcome any feedback. If you end up taking this and want to provide feedback, something doesn't sit right or it didn't read right, please let us know. You don't agree with your score, be happy to know that as well. So open to feedback. Okay, the Mighty GPS measures 6 marketing categories across 4 maturity stages. These categories are broad in order to cover all the aspects of marketing. So some of it can be quantified, some of it cannot. There's about 6 to 8 questions in each category for a total of about 40 questions. Those categories are research and analytics, branding and strategy, marketing and SEO, UX design and content, technology, and team dynamics. Once you take the GPS, you're going to get a score, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but that score will determine your maturity stage, and those are crawling, walking, running, and soaring. So we have 4 stages, and we'll go into each one in a bit more detail. Before we do that, I just want to mention, if you are going to take the Mighty GPS, we highly recommend you take it with your team. It was created primarily for the heads of marketing and comms because they know their departments best and they have that overall big picture of sort of everything that everyone's doing. However, we do suggest you take it with your full team. Now, if you're a one-person team, I know there's some of you on this call, that's easy, you're the team. If there's 5 of you, we recommend that all of you take it. And by doing that, you're going to see whether you're all pretty much in alignment on where you stand, or if you're not. There's value in that alone. If you are an organization where one of you scores a 40% and one of you scores a 75% and one of you scores an 80%, that tells me somewhere there's some misalignment. Two of you are pretty close, but somebody's not quite either seeing everything or understanding everything, and it'll help you get into alignment. You may also want other teams within your organization to take the GPS. For example, if you're at a really large organization and you have a separate events team, maybe a fundraising team, a technology team, anybody where the marketing is really affecting their work, you may want to invite them to take it as well. And again, that requires a lot of vulnerability, but can be really helpful. You're going to get a more rounded view of what's happening, and maybe, just maybe, keep you honest, because let's be fair, when we're filling out and affecting the study on our own, we might want to, be kind to ourselves. The 6 marketing categories. Jarrett, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sorry, still muted. Thanks, Rachel. So Rachel mentioned the 6 marketing categories that we cover in the Mighty DPS. I'm happy to go just a little bit more in depth, still high level with each of these, starting with research and analytics. So research and analytics is the understanding your audience is the research part, and then analytics is what helps that understanding. So how are you gathering data and understanding about your audiences? What are you using to interpret that data? How are you interpreting that data to maybe impact some change in your content and other marketing efforts? So things like, have you considered your audience surveys to inform your marketing decisions, and if you're using analytics to further that insight? Secondly, the second key category we have is branding and strategy. So branding is how your audiences perceive you. So not just what your organization says and thinks about itself, but what your audiences say and think about you as well. And the strategy part of that is how you're influencing that perception. So on the branding side, we're asking things about guidelines for your messaging and your branding, as well as everything else that falls under the massive umbrella of branding. And on the strategy, we're asking things about your written annual communications plan. So not just having ideas for your communications and your marketing, but asking if you actually have it written down and encouraging you to do so. Third, we have marketing and SEO. So this key category, marketing and SEO, obviously pretty broad on the marketing front. But marketing is your outreach to the world. And then the search engine optimization side of it is what brings people into your world. I always say, if you build it, they will come. So we're talking about things like keyword research when we talk about SEO. And so on the marketing side, have you established key goals and shared those with your leadership? So not only do you have marketing goals, but are those laddering up to your organizational goals, your strategic goals overall as an organization? And then again, on the SEO side, are you using search engine optimization to drive traffic to your website? Next, we have UX design and content, user experience design and content. So UX design is how well people are interacting with you, and content tells them that they're in the right place. So think about your website. Is your website optimized for a good user experience? Is it optimized kind of laddering up to your brand goals in terms of marketing, messaging, communications? And then the content, again, tells them that they're in the right place. So there's a content actually supporting those strategic goals as well, and does it make sense for the audiences that you're trying to entertain? And then fifth, we have technology. This key category is all about your technological ecosystem for your organization, if you will. So all these different pieces of technology that you're using to keep your marketing and communications efforts afloat, are they integrated correctly? Are they communicating with each other in the right way? Are you missing any major pieces of technology that you might be needing? So is your website easy to maintain, your CMS, your content management system on the back end? We ask questions like, do your different platforms integrate seamlessly, like I just said? So making sure everything is working like it should in your technology front for your marketing communications. And then last, the key category, the sixth one is team dynamics. So your team dynamics is how well your team works together to achieve your organizational goals. So what are the skill sets that are represented across your marketing team? Even if it's a small marketing team, what do you need to accomplish for your day to day, and who's responsible, and how are those skills represented on your team? So does your internal team have a variety of skills, And then does your leadership also believe in the power of marketing communications? Is there buy-in for your marketing efforts organizationally from the top down? It's extremely crucial for any marketing efforts ever. And those are the 6 categories. I'll turn it back over to Rachel to talk about the marketing maturity score.
Yeah, so once you take that self-assessment, you're going to get a score across each category, individual category, and then you're also going to get an overall score from 0 to 100. Now, if you were curious how these broke down, each of these maturity scores, the scoring is 0 to 39 for crawling, 40 to 59 for walking, 60 to 80 for running, and then 81 plus essentially for soaring. And of course, this is across all those 6 categories. Now we're going to take a look at the stages here in a minute, but before we do that, I want to get a quick gut check from you guys. Our second poll, just, you know nothing yet about each of these stages except for the scoring. So I'm curious, your gut instinct, this is that kind of initial qualitative data. Let's see, where you think you are. So as the results are coming in, looks like most of you think you're in walking. There's about 60% of you that say that, so that's pretty big. Nobody's saying soaring right now. I don't know is a fair answer at this point, let's be honest. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share these results. So the majority of you by far said walking. I'd love to see the running showing up at 20%, crawling at 14%, and then soaring. Now we're going to go into each one of these, but I just put the poll in here at this point to say, even if you don't use the Mighty GPS as your marketing effectiveness tool, this might be helpful to you, and it'll give you it'll kind of confirm basically that you are where you think you are, or you're not. Okay, so let's go into each of those 4 stages in a bit more detail. Now, I have to have a word of caution up here at the top, and that's that we are using some generalizations. For your stage, for each stage, I'm going to show challenges and next steps. And for your stage, some of those challenges and next steps will be applicable, or absolutely should be, to you, and some won't be. Every organization is at a different point along their marketing maturity journey, and we cannot account for all of your unique qualities or your little picadillos. So instead, we've created these stages to best fit what we see many or most of the organizations within that stage. So the first stage is crawling. Some of the common things that we see in crawling organizations is that they're often smaller or newer organizations. It's not always the case, but often those organizations are more likely to be in crawling. They often have limited resources or buy-in from leadership, again, often because they're smaller or scrappier. They can be one-person teams. This does not mean that a one-person team has to be in crawling. In fact, we see plenty in the walking phase, and probably some even in the running. But just know that one-person teams are asked to do a lot with very little, and so they often end up here. Sometimes these teams will have someone who inherited marketing. They're accidental marketers. Maybe they were fundraisers or technology people or event people, and now they're in charge of the comms. That's also another occurrence that can happen. You can be doing, I think I covered most of the things here, a couple things. No concrete goals. Sometimes they're doing marketing just for the sake of doing marketing, sending an email for the sake of sending an email, but not necessarily knowing what that email is meant to accomplish. And therefore, they're often more reactive than proactive. You can be doing all the basics of marketing. You could have an email cadence, be sending a monthly newsletter, have a website that works and collects money in some form or fashion, and still be in the crawling phase. It doesn't mean you're not moving. Crawling means moving. It doesn't mean standing still. So all that to say, if you find yourself in crawling, do not despair. The next steps for crawling are all about learning and furthering your fundamentals and putting best practices in place. The great news about crawling is that there's a ton of opportunity to make really big impact, and you can choose which direction you're going to move in first, what you're going to establish as your next steps. It can seem overwhelming to be in this phase, but just remember that journey is made one step at a time. If you're familiar with Anne Lamott, she has a book called Bird by Bird. She talks about taking a book report. We had to do 50 birds, and she was like, just take it bird by bird. That's what this is, step by step. Okay, so next steps, they vary from surveying your audiences, establishing brand guidelines, creating a budget and a plan, and setting measurable goals. So you'll identify your greatest opportunities and set to work implementing those next steps. Lastly, if you're in crawling, it may be because you haven't gotten the support or investment that you need from your leadership. Your very first step, if that is the case, may be going to them and saying, here's why we need to invest money and human capital into marketing and communications, just sort of making the general case for why marketing matters and why you deserve some investment in order to see it through. Walking. 60% of you said you think you're in walking. I can tell you that most orgs that have completed the Mighty GPS so far are in the walking stage. So you're probably pretty right. Challenges include a lack of urgency that may stifle investment. Here's what I mean by that. You're doing all right. You're doing pretty good. Your numbers are good. They're more or less fine. You know, no major competitors are stealing your audiences away. If it's broke, don't fix it. But of course, we know that can cause inertia. And in this day and age, especially if you're not keeping up with the modern marketing strategies, you are falling behind. So, you know, kind of status quo doesn't last for very long. Decisions are driven by experience, not by research and data. Maybe you haven't done a lot of research and data. In fact, our data shows you probably haven't, and therefore, you know, you're going on your gut instinct, but that is not always correct. You could be saddled with old or clunky technologies or things that don't talk to one another. Your website user experience is passable, functionally it works, but it may not be optimized to really help you bring in more dollars. And then lastly, the walking stage can also be reactive versus proactive. Keep in mind too, I mentioned this before, those in the walking stage can be a one-person team. And if that's the case, kudos to you because you are one person who's doing a lot. Next steps for the walking stage are all about establishing full confidence. Your bones are there, but you want to know that the work you're putting in is paying off. So basically you have a strong foundation on which to build exceptional new results. There's a lot of opportunity in walking. Next steps include optimizing your Google Analytics, honing your messaging, prioritizing your website's UX, and potentially implementing more advanced technology. Now, you might say, Rachel, I thought we were in marketing, but we can't be in marketing because our Google Analytics is up, it's running, I monitor it weekly, and I make changes to our digital properties based on what Google Analytics tells me. So I know I've got my Google Analytics up and running like a machine. Remember, there are a few generalizations here and there because we're talking about lots of organizations as a whole. So if you thought you were in walking and one of these doesn't fit, that's going to be okay because it doesn't mean you're not in walking. Running. If you're in running, you're ahead of the competition. A little pat on the back here, but there's still plenty of room to grow. I actually think running might be the very best stage to be in because you're doing a lot of things really well. You're doing a lot of sophisticated things really well. You're using data to drive your decision-making. Your website's firing on all cylinders. Technology's in a good spot, but there's still a lot of opportunity for optimization and improvement. So your efforts currently, if you're in running, are clearly connected to your organizational goals, and you're seeing real payoff from the marketing team's efforts organizationally. Yet, they still have challenges, and those include financial time or knowledge limitations that are preventing you from getting to that soaring stage. Some of the common challenges are internal knowledge has hit its limits. My word, we cannot keep up. We are not machines. Marketing is changing so quickly, it's hard to keep up with the latest. If you're in running, you're doing a lot already. Honestly, if you're in every stage, let's be honest, we're all doing a lot of work already. But all that to say, it's hard to keep up. And so you're going to run into some internal knowledge limitations. There's not real impetus to change a whole lot because kind of like walking, it's working. And so it's sort of hard to argue about it. SEO, Google Analytics, and research efforts can be light. Maybe it's been a while since you did your research and it's time to go back and do another study. Technologies often contain unused features. A lot of us have our technology in a good spot, but there's just a lot that we're not using that we could be. And then strategies are built on thinking that's more than 2 or 3 years old. Again, if you haven't surveyed your audience or talked to your audience in a while, it may be time to do that, even with running. Next steps for the running stage are all about optimizing your infrastructure or making the most of what's working for you. So again, you've got the basics and you're running well with what you have, but where do your opportunities exist to go deeper, increase your efficiencies, or maybe optimize what's already in place? So your next steps include diving deeper into your audience research, auditing your content and UX. If you are a running organization and you are at a larger company, you guys are producing so much content. It quickly gets out of date, cumbersome, nobody's looking at it. Auditing some of that, or maybe your user experience on your website, can go a really long way. These small edits can make huge impacts. Testing, and more testing. A/B testing is key when you are a running organization. And then assessing your data security and privacy practices. Y'all, I hate that we have to do all this now. It's so much. There's laws we have to follow. It's just as if marketing weren't enough to keep up with. Now we got to keep up with data security and privacy. It's always changing, and that makes it a real challenge. Soaring. Okay, if you're in soaring, you get the big pat on the back. This is hard to reach. It's often occupied by larger companies, but not always. I can tell you that only 6% of the organizations that have completed the Mighty GPS so far are showing up in soaring. So it is a hard stage to reach. If you find yourselves here, you can have peace of mind knowing that you're crushing your marketing objectives, you're hitting your strategic goals, growing your fan base, and your organization, again, is seeing that real impact. You are poised to own the messaging around your mission, whatever it may be, and shape the larger conversation. So thought leadership is really key for the soaring phase. But having said all that, of course, they have their challenges. And those include, when you've got big ideas for how to, get over a hurdle or push through something, it often requires a big budget. And so that's a challenge. Content governance isn't always in place. If you're not familiar with what content governance is, it is the collection of rules, processes, and protocols, basically this establishing a system for how an organization identifies, creates, publishes, maintains, and archives content. It's a mouthful, but it's especially critical for larger organizations. I'll give you an example. If you are a state, say you're the University of Texas, large state-funded organization, every department's posting their own content. Every program is, producing content, videos, images, graphics, text, etc. All of that can get unwieldy very fast, especially when they don't talk to each other, and that's what content governance helps. It can be hard to share project nuances with leadership, get down to the KPIs and your OKRs and your ROI and all your other acronyms. That's what they care about. And then scaling the success of marketing across all of your organization can be difficult, especially in sharing what's working for you can be difficult, especially when it's siloed. Okay, next steps in the soaring stage are all about experimenting and influencing. So you're going to be looking, things are working really well. So you're going to be scouring in your organization to look for those little opportunities and hopefully share what you've learned with your peers outside your organization as well. So next steps include A/B testing, implementing content governance, iterating on your new technologies and your new features, coaching your team. I cannot express this one enough. If you are in soaring, you've got a lot to teach others, not just on your internal team, but also among your peers and other nonprofits. So make sure that you are working to coach people. You should be doing that now and giving back. And then seeking new ideas from outside partners. When you're soaring, you know your organization really well. It can be hard to get out of that 3,000 foot view to see the full 30,000 foot view. And sometimes bringing in consultants or outside partners can help achieve that. So I want to do the poll again. I want to see what you guys think now. So we know, I'm trying to remember while we launched this, 60% thought they were walking. It was like 20% running, and about 14% crawling. So I'll be curious to see. So far, it is holding up to about the same as previously. I'm gonna let a few of you come in here, but you guys, it looks like your gut instincts might have been about right. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and share this. They're coming in very closely. Those that said, I don't know, now have answers. It looks like some of you went into crawling, some went into running. So all this to say, oh, sorry, I didn't share the answers. All this to say, our gut instincts are often correct. And that is a valuable resource. So that qualitative, how do I know my marketing effectiveness? Generally, we have some idea. Having said that, again, the Mighty GPS will help you hone in on particular next steps. And so let me stop sharing this. And with that in mind, I want to share real quickly what our data is showing. We launched the Mighty GPS February 10th, so we're just short of 2 months. When I ran these numbers, there were 220 submissions. And I can tell you that the majority of the scores are between 35% and 79%. Majority of scores are somewhere between crawling and running. We see that with your gut instincts. This puts most orgs in walking or running. Again, your gut instincts are about right. And as I said, the walking stage is the most popular or most populated stage. Greater budgets do generally correlate with increased marketing maturity, but not always. Again, we're seeing small, scrappy orgs showing up higher up in the running as well. Research and analytics is by far our lowest scoring category. In fact, across those 220 submissions, the average is in crawling. This is the one area that we all need to be doing more work in, especially because what you do in research and analytics affects all your other categories. Cannot state that enough. And then team dynamics ranks highest. This is great. There could be some bias happening because it's people on the team that are filling out the survey. I realize that, but we do think highly of our teams and the work they're doing. And then that's followed by branding and strategy. So Jarrett, you want to talk to us about the Mighty GPS report? Oh, you're on mute.
Muted once again. I've been doing this for how long? So the custom report. So you take your 10-minute assessment. This is the real meat and potatoes of Mighty GPS. This is really where the value comes in. So you take your assessment, immediately in your inbox, you'll get an email that includes what you see right here in front of you. So you have your overall marketing maturity score that Rachel was talking about. So in this example, we have 71%. And then it will give you your overall stage. So in this example, they are in the running stage. And then you see that link to go and download this report. So you immediately get your score and stage and this link to a web page where you can download your report. You'll also see a bar graph across the 6 key categories that I was talking to you about. So you can see a very great visual example of how you stack up across all 6 categories. So you can use this to kind of share briefly and quickly how you stack up across the 6 to anyone else in your organization or beyond. And then you also see it broken down by each category. So in this example, in their research and analytics section, they received a 51%, which is in the walking stage for research and analytics. And then you can see right below has some description as well as all of the resources that we have for research and analytics, many of which are Mighty Citizens' own resources that we've been developing for mission-driven organizations for quite some time. So you can use this custom report to do a few things. First of which is to spark some conversation. So I was talking earlier about knowing what does work and what does not work for your organization. So this is a clear report to tell you some of those things, and you should be talking about them because at the end of the day, you're talking about the allocation of your resources. So you should know what is and what isn't working so you can reallocate there. It also helps you build your case internally. So being able to understand, again, what is and what isn't working and to make a case for what you want to pour those resources into for whoever you have to make that case to. It'll help you prioritize those things that you want to improve. So you have a pretty clear picture of what's maybe the most dire need at that point, which section, so you can see what resources you want to put there. You can check back. We talked about the benchmarking. So I'll talk a little bit more about how you want to work with that benchmarking and taking this report and how often. And then also, and lastly, it's just to get expert advice. So I talked to you about those resources. They're right there for each of the 6 key categories. We have really targeted these resources to be helpful and valuable for each of these sections. And they're completely free to all of you. So taking this assessment, you just get this wealth of knowledge that we've been putting a lot of time into to help support some mission-driven organizations.
Yeah, so you've taken the GPS, you've got your report. How do you put that report into action? Because this is the real value, as Jarrett said. First thing I want to tell you about is the Mighty GPS Get Started Planner. So this is going to help you make a plan for your next steps that works hand in hand with your Mighty GPS custom report. So when you get that report back, as you saw, under each category, there's about 5 or 6 next steps. That means in your full report, you're going to have about 35 recommendations across all the categories. It's a lot. It's a lot. And the Mighty GPS Planner is going to help you figure out what to tackle first, and then also break down each of those next steps into tactical tasks. So it's just a workbook that helps you figure out kind of, okay, I know I need to do this next, now what? I would suggest you gather with your marketing teammates together to strategize on this document and complete it together. If you need to complete alone or your one-person team, that's fine. But if the marketing affects other departments, again, I would invite them in and get feedback early. At Mighty Citizen, we always advocate that if you are creating a plan, you should talk to anybody that is going to have an opinion or say on that plan before you begin putting into action, because to find out early is much better than the 11th hour when that random person pops up and was like, oh, I thought it would do this. Let's talk about it up front. Okay, have your report in hand, get together and answer these questions, include it in the planner. And I'm going to show you an example in a minute of what that looks like. So again, you're in running using the report Justin, my husband's name, Jarrett just shared with us. You're in running, but you get a few categories that are weaker than others. And one of those was research and analytics. So your lowest scoring category, if you remember that bar chart, was actually marketing and SEO at 35%, followed by research and analytics at 51%. You do not have to start with your lowest scoring category. It can be a good place to start, but sometimes you might want to start with a different category. Now, you know that even though research was your marketing was research wasn't your lowest score, it's really important because what you learn here could affect all your other categories. Like I just mentioned a minute ago, research is so important. So you decide you're going to start with research and analytics. So with that in mind, you take a look at the recommended next steps, which by the way, they do adapt for every stage. So the walking next steps are different under research than the crawling or the running. I would start with no more than 3 next steps that you want to work on. It can even be 1. There's no limit or maximum to how many, or no limit to how few you can do. There may be some overlap between them, but remember that marketing maturity, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You don't want to tire out and kill your team and lose all your momentum. So really think realistically about what your team can achieve and how many of these they can tackle at once. Now, I want you to imagine again that this is your report and your organization is going to be launching a new program later this year. So if you're at a nonprofit, maybe you've got a new fundraising program. If you're an association, maybe you're launching a new CE course. Universities, you might have a new student program a degree program that you're unveiling. And if you're in the government, maybe it's a new public initiative. So we're all slightly different in terms of what our programs might be, but you know that you're going to be launching one later this year. So you might think, okay, we're going to need a marketing campaign to help launch this new program, but I don't know a whole lot about the audience. So I need to start here. I need to learn more about them. I need to know about their preferences, their desires, their concerns, before we begin the strategy, the marketing campaign strategy for the new program. So this is where I'm going to start. You're then going to look at each of the resources that are attached to that next step. So if you were to click on the user research link that I showed there, the first one that was circled, this is what you're going to get. This is an article that tells you what some user research techniques are and how to do them right. So we're going to tell you exactly how to do it on your own. In a high level way. And we're going to link to that and really provide resources for you. By the way, all of this is free. We are linking to our own site and our resources and our education, but all of it's free and you can run with it, what you learn from the site. So you can use these linked resources along with the Mighty GPS Get Started Planner to help you plan out that next step. So I'll show you what that looks like. So the planner is a workbook. It's going to ask you questions so that you can answer it and drive in deeper on each of those next steps that you've identified. So it will ask a series of questions, and it also includes in the planner an example to help you better fill it out. So in this example, my number 1 goal, it's going to ask me, what's my number 1 goal? My number 1 goal is to learn from our audience research to inform that future program launch. It's going to ask me, what activities do I need to do in order to complete this goal? One of the things I know I need to do is I need to interview. I need to do some little focus group work, individual interviews with internal and external audiences. And how did I know that this was the next step? I read that article that was linked. What's my measurable metric for this activity? How I know I finished it? When I've conducted 10 interviews with key audiences. And then it's going to drive into the tactics. Like, what are the things that have to happen for me to interview everybody? And what are the timelines? So the first thing I got to do is I got to develop a list of stakeholders to interview. I'm going to do that by May 31st. Second tactic I got to do is I got to develop a list of questions. And maybe there's a different set of questions for each type of audience. I'm going to do that by June 10th. I'm going to conduct my interviews by June 30th. And then I'm going to give myself a little bit longer, full month, in order to assess and analyze those results so I can glean any insights from these interviews I did. The Get Started Planner is going to ask you, how are you going to put this activity into action? Because let's be honest, y'all, it's not worth doing something and spending time on it if we're not going to put it into action. So we're going to use our insights from our audience research to create content and or personas that can be used in an upcoming launch program. It's finally going to ask you about budget. You know, you don't have a lot of things you're going to be doing. They require zero budget. In fact, interviews could require zero budget. But in our fantastical situation here, we've decided we're going to send thank you cards with little $5 coffee gift cards as well. Another quick example, again, you're in running. Hey, here's that crawling stage, marketing and SEO. It's raising its little head. We know we have our program launch coming up. I think it'd be helpful to put some efforts here as well. I'm going to focus on developing a marketing campaign strategy in order to get that thing launched. I'm going to read the resource that's available. In this case, it's a template, and I'm going to use the research, of course, that I've just done in order to help complete this, because strategy is so much easier when we have research to back it up. And that template, I can go and download it right away from our site. I can get started in that template immediately. It's going to, again, ask me questions, have me fill out answers to those questions. Or I can also use the Get Started Planner to fill in more details before I get to the template. So all this to say, it sounds like a lot. It can be a lot. You can jump right in with 2 feet and just go from the article or from the resource, or you can use that Get Started Planner to help you think a little deeper. Jarrett, what's next?
Just proving that I can unmute when I need to.
That's okay.
So you have taken your assessment, you've taken the 10 minutes, you've gotten your custom report, you've used your planner to help workshop some of your weaker sections. So what's next with the Mighty GPS? So I talked about benchmarking earlier. The first thing I want to say about benchmarking is that you should take the Mighty GPS every 6 months to 1 year. You probably know better, or you definitely know better than I do, how often this should be for your organization. It's really just depending on how much you're able to move the needle from the last time you took the GPS. So you have a better idea of how often this should be, but every 6 months to a year is what we recommend. You should also hang on to these reports. So I mentioned in the email, you get your web link, but you can also download a version of this report right to your computer. A native file, you should also put that in any shared folder that's accessible to your entire team. So everyone should be able to have access to this report to see the effectiveness of your marketing efforts and where you want to put some resources into. And then benchmarking will also help you show some progress in a way that you haven't been able to before. So not only with your overall score and your overall stage, but even by key category, being able to say, we went from 52% walking to 65% running in the research stage, you know, being able to prove that to whoever you need to make that case to throughout time, every 6 months to every year, having some real actionable data to implement to make some positive cases for your marketing efforts. I'll turn it back over. Oh, and actually, sorry, one more slide, the future plans for the Mighty GPS. So of course, we're encouraging you to do your own benchmarking, but we're hopeful that with enough data over time, we'll be able to provide you all with some really great benchmarking across the industries that we work with. So nonprofits, associations, universities, government agencies, being able to see how the numbers stack up across those industries, but also across different budgets. So the budgets that different organizations are working with, and also just the revenue where applicable as well. We're going to do some reporting on what we're seeing based on the Mighty GPS across each industry. So taking a lot of this data that we're getting across those 4 industries and producing some content around it to share some of our findings from the data. So we're hopeful that those 2 things and much more will be coming in 2023 and beyond. And now I will turn it back over to Rachel.
Yeah, we just want to say thank you. I know Bree is sharing this link in the chat as well, but if you want to get these slides, the Mighty GPS white paper, we have a full white paper that talks all about maturity. If you've seen this presentation, you probably don't necessarily need the white paper. If you're like me and you know you'll forget 2 months from now, go ahead and download that thing. You can get the Mighty GPS planner as well as a link to the Mighty GPS itself, the self-assessment, all at mightyscitizen.com/maturity. And then let's get to questions. I'm going to turn it over to Bree. Again, the direct link to the self-assessment is the mightygps.com. All right, Bree.
Thanks, Rachel and Jarrett. That was great. We have a few questions. One of the first ones is someone was curious from a technology and website usability perspective. Any advice for government entities that don't have control on what website platforms we're able to use? So they have a centralized website system that's not super dynamic.
Advice. Oh, that's a hard one. You know, universities see the same thing. The only way we have found to really make it effective, like I'm thinking about your Google Analytics. I'm not sure if that's what you're referencing about advice, but one of the challenges we've seen is our departments or our agencies don't own the content or like don't own the technology as a whole. And so we're at the mercy of whatever department does own that. And so we have to have strong relationships with them. The best way we found to like get at the data that maybe we wouldn't get otherwise is we have to tell them exactly what we're doing, exactly why we're doing it, and then cross our fingers and hope for the best. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of those large centralized organizations where you don't have a lot of control over what you have access to.
Right.
I don't know that I have like, here's exactly how you get that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I just don't have that.
Okay. Somebody had a question about A/B testing. So they have a smaller database to work with and are asking, how would you suggest testing without losing the opportunity for a call to action? So I asked him if he could clarify a little bit on that. So he said, I'm curious with setting up an A/B testing in email campaigns. I feel like having a smaller database, I want my CTAs to bring results. My concern would be about losing or not utilizing an opportunity to its fullest with the A/B testing if the CTAs are different according to each campaign. So, do you have any suggestions on testing without that? I know we do quite a bit of testing, Jarrett, so I didn't know if there was any suggestions on that work.
Sure. That's tricky. And I would say, it really comes with the territory of A/B testing. But the more you do it, the more refined your results are. So you're not losing as many people. You're kind of knowing what works and kind of optimizing and tweaking your tests, and they're a little bit more fine-tuned. So you may not be losing so many people to different CTAs. You may know what's working. You just kind of want to know what's working best in between 2 really good options. So it kind of comes with the territory for A/B testing at first, but the more that you do it, it kind of compounds on itself over time.
I think this would be a good opportunity too to mention Google Optimize. For those of you, you may need some tech skills, like if you have a tech team, they might want to help with this, but there's a free resource called Google Optimize. We've used it on our site. We don't have a huge amount of people coming. I mean, we have a decent amount, but not like, we're not Amazon over here. And so when we have a smaller database for things that aren't email, like website A/B testing, you can run those for longer. Just run your test for longer until you feel like you've got enough data to be able to make a call. And the great thing about Google Optimize is it'll tell you when it thinks a call can be made. And it's been great for just sort of really small CTA testing, navigation testing. We've used it for lots of different things. So highly recommend Google Optimize as well.
Sure. All right, next question. Can we consider social media as an arm of the marketing maturity or consolidated efforts?
100%.
Yeah.
I would say so. You know, we say everything that you produce is content. Content is right there snugly in all of the mighty GPS kind of survey, you know, the content that we produce, the results. I would say social media absolutely is a part of it.
And it's one of the questions, at least one of the questions in the self-assessment.
All right, let's see, last question. So one person team who does all the marketing communications, fundraising, graphics, content, finding time to do research and analytics is hard. Any ideas, you know, maybe something to get started with first?
Yeah, I hear that. I would say when it comes to research and analytics, perhaps you put together a survey. I actually think that's one of the quickest ways to get into research. Now, how you do that survey is really important. Surveys can be very biased. We have lots of good resources on surveys at our website. And we basically tell you, we actually have a survey guide. We have a communication survey guide and a fundraising survey guide. So depending on, you know, what you need, that'll give you some sample questions to ask. But if you ask those questions, there's actually long-term benefits to that. If you ask, you know, questions about communication preferences or what kind of content they want from you, depending on what you need. If you ask that, you know, today, April 7th, I can use that same survey. And in fact, there's value in using that same survey a year from now or 2 years from now. And then I don't have to do the work again. And I can easily compare my answers from last year to this year. So I would say surveys are the easiest place to start. You can outsource that too. I don't know if you have resources for that, but it's often better to get an outside party to do your research only because of the bias that is inherent in your own organization.
Okay, great. Let's see, one more question. Any advice for when you don't have a budget for paid marketing, like boosting posts? I guess maybe other advice in the social, any kind of like non-paid marketing?
Jarrett, I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah, I would say, you know, if you don't have the resources to pour into some paid social opportunities, then I would tinker with your organic messaging, kind of seeing what works best, what your target audience is, or desired audiences are responding to with what you're already putting out, and testing some of those messages to see what works best. So when you move into the stage where maybe you've made a case for wanting to do some paid social, you know what messaging is already the most effective for the audiences that you're trying to reach.
Right. All right. I think that is it, and which is perfect timing because we're just at time. Again, just want to say thank you, Jarrett and Rachel. This was great. Thank you for everyone's time. Just a quick note, when you exit, you will be taken to a post-webinar survey. So we hope you'll take a minute to tell us what you think. We really value any feedback, and we use it to update our future webinars and come up with different new content topics. So thanks again. I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.